Hello, friends and family in Christ, and happy Natural Family Month. That's right. I've got Linda Harvey with Mission America coming up in just a minute. We're going to be talking about how government is exploiting crises to rescue children. They're using suicide hotlines and things like that to lure kids into the LGBTQ cult. Also, woke education is going strong, stronger than a lot of you parents might think if you've got kids in the government-run schools. That and more coming up.
Welcome to Worldview Matters, discussing controversial issues, discerning current events, defending biblical Christianity. No topic off limits. And now, here's your host, David Fiorazzo.
Well, it's June, so let's bring in Linda Harvey of Mission America. Linda, I'm wishing you a happy Natural Family Month. How are you?
I'm great, David, and how are you? Well, happy
Great.
Natural Month to you.
Thank you. Good to see you and hear you. We had a few technical issues before we got on the podcast. This is going, so praise God. Let's get an update on your ministry and just what you've been doing. I know you've been keeping busy there in Ohio.
Yes, we're very busy. We continue to follow what's going on in the schools nationwide and in our state of Ohio. And I just testified on a bill down at the Ohio State House, so I jump in and do that every now and then, a bill to ban DEI in the K through 12 schools in Ohio. So we'll see how that goes. We hope and pray that that passes. But we are continuing our radio outreach nationally on the American Family Radio Network, as well as here in Ohio on the Salem Network, and our website at missionamerica.com, our e-newsletter, and so on. So that's what we're doing.
Wait a minute, Linda. I need you to clarify something. President Trump signed an executive order. I thought DEI was eradicated across the country.
Yeah, well, we wish. What has to happen is that local schools and states need to follow up on this. What he did was send out a letter to all schools in the country and asking them that were funded at all through the Department of Education, and that's pretty much all of them, and asked, do you pledge to do no discrimination based on the 1964 Civil Rights Act through DEI programs? And most, I'm just talking for Ohio, most of the schools signed it, but a few of them did not. They just dug in their heels and said, oh no, we're not signing this. So apparently they're hoping and praying they can continue to discriminate based on skin color. I mean, that's what's going on. And also to promote the LGBTQ agenda, which is almost always part, oddly enough, of DEI programs, because it's nothing like race, as we know. So that's what's going on.
So this is a battle state by state, school district to school district. So parents cannot assume that this is being taken out of the schools. I just want you to clarify that. I know the answer. Go ahead.
Yes, you can't assume it. You can assume that they're on the defense and that in some cases they will eliminate positions, like if they've hired an equity director or something, that those will be eliminated, or maybe they'll just be renamed. So you just have to check, because no, it's not just a done deal. But in some cases, it is a done deal. So we can just praise Donald Trump for what he has tried to do, and for the Department of Education in Washington, pulling those strings back, because they do have the purse strings. That is an enormous amount of power. So we're really happy about that.
So I want to direct people to your website, something that we've talked about many times before, the School Corruption and Propaganda Calendar at missionamerica.com. There's an article there, School Corruption and Propaganda Calendar. And I mean, it goes for everything starting in September. It goes Bisexual Week, LGBTQ History Month, October. GLSEN has, influence there. There's Pronouns Day, Spirit Day, Solidarity Week, Transgender Awareness Week, November, No Name Calling Week, Black History Month, Transgender Day of Visibility, and so much. Day of No Silence. It's Day of Silence, right? There's so much more. Linda, June, of course, LGBTQ Pride Month. A lot of people don't understand. We see some corporations backing off a little bit. I see a lot of conservative news outlets maybe put out, I don't want to say naive, but I guess they're overly optimistic. And the corporations like Target, right? They're never going to reverse their worldview on the warped ideology, but they have taken some of it out of maybe their stores. Speak to that issue for a moment, please.
Yeah, now you're right. I've done a little touting of this myself because we have to try to have some good news.
Yes.
And it is good that there is some backing off going on. However, like for instance, Anheuser-Busch, because they got so burned, the Bud Light issue, they have backed off of many of their sponsorships of Pride parades in the country. Like here in Columbus, Columbus, Ohio, has a huge Pride parade, and Anheuser-Busch was a big supporter. Well, guess what? The all Democrat Columbus City Council jumped in and gave them $100,000. So I think maybe I might be wrong on that. I think it's even more money than that to replace and help them to recoup that loss of money. So, we just have to keep our eyes on that too, because yes, some ground has been gained, but an awful lot has yet to be done.
So there's a brief article over at the WashingtonStand.com by Tony Perkins, Family Research Council. And he says, corporations' silence on pride speaks volumes. I wasn't going to bring this up, but since we started talking about it, he said, while the destruction of the movement may not be imminent, we are seeing some encouraging signs that through continued prayer, education, and activism, we can bring about the collapse of an ideology that seeks to normalize the abnormal and to shame what is good, right, and true. And then he talked about how the Target stock, plummeted 61% over the past 5 years. Maybe they got the message at Target. Maybe Anheuser-Busch maybe got a little message, but like you said, it's not completely eradicated. Anything you want to say about that, Linda, before we move on to this article at the Wall Street Journal?
Well, I think Tony does a good job of summarizing what's going on. We can take some and know that if we keep sounding the alarm, we can make more inroads, but we have to keep sounding the alarm. We can't just go out and start relaxing on our couches and thinking that everything's all done.
Yeah. So we opened up the podcast today saying, hey, friends, happy Natural Family Month. And you have that over at your website. You've got Natural Family Month stands strong despite prideful critics. A lot of people have never heard of this, Linda. I think we need alternatives for June because of the indoctrination and the warped ideology that's been pushed down our throats for at least a decade or two. Talk to us about Natural Family Month and why you put that up there. Thank you for the links also, by the way.
Yes. Natural Family Month is an idea that between Mother's Day and Father's Day, we're going to celebrate the natural family that is a mom and dad in a committed marriage and their own biological or adopted children. And committed step parents are honored in this as well. And so my friend, longtime Central Ohio colleague and pro-family warrior named Jim Harrison, this is his baby. If you want to know more about it, their website is naturalfamilystrong.com. And so he's trying to make this a national movement, and I think he will, because what happens is, you're right, people are looking for an alternative, and right away the LGBTQ folks came out and said, oh, no, this doesn't include us and our parenthood. We're single parents, and so it excludes lots of families. And, as I wrote, it doesn't exclude anybody. You exclude yourself when you've taken on some of these behaviors. We don't want to be discouraging to single parents who've had, especially if you've had that happen to you, not of your choice. Mm-hmm. And we know that God will pick people up, and if people commit themselves to living a God-honoring life as in their singlehood or praying for, a family and a committed marriage in the future, that God will bless that person and guide them and provide alternative fathers, usually for those families. However, we don't want to honor the behaviors of homosexuality or gender confusion. Nobody has to go down those roads. They're not inborn. So that's what this is all about.
So, God ordained natural marriage between one man and one woman and resulting in a family, honoring the family. I think that's a great idea, friends. So let's promote that at the end of May and in June every year. So Linda, let's talk about this article. Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, that hits home. It's not far from here where we record Worldview Matters in Appleton, just southwest of Green Bay. Wauwatosa is in the Milwaukee area, closer to Milwaukee. The article is called "Woke Education is Going Strong Even in Middle America." And the subheading, "Schools in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin embrace far left fads from gender identity to restorative justice," right? Whenever you put something in front of justice, you've got to put air quotes around justice. Before we dive into a couple of I just want to read a few quotes from the article, just your overall thoughts. And I really appreciate you sending it because a lot of parents in small town USA, including Wisconsin, that they don't think that this is in their schools or there's a problem. The wokeness, the woke indoctrination is a problem in their son or daughter's school.
Right. Well, what the article was focusing on is that a lot of these woke ideologies, the sexuality, the gender, and the restorative justice have been the education establishment and in their schools of education, these folks and in the teachers' unions have been thoroughly indoctrinated to accept many of these ideas that really tear apart the foundation of education, which is academic achievement. And so what they do on the sexuality issue, they're down to 6th grade sex education. Yes, folks. And some of it is quite graphic. And they're using what they call in Wauwatosa, and this is all over, and you will find this in many of your school districts, what they call themselves, the National Sexuality Education Standards. It's not an official anything. It's a Planned Parenthood, far left, no pro-life in there, nothing, no abstinence, genuine abstinence in there at all. And so they go on and these 6th graders have to define every kind of sexual intercourse. And that includes, well, lots of kinds. So I don't know how much you can let me say on this program. But anyway, so we know where they're going with this. The other thing they do is this thing called restorative justice, where rather than punishing misbehavior in schools by students, they reward them with little treats and incentives, thinking that they're deprived and this is the reason they're misbehaving, and it isn't working. On the whole, it is just simply not working.
And one of the stats, it says, back to gender ideology, at least 37% of American students learn about gender ideology at school. At least 37%. And it also says that Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, is one of thousands of districts to have adopted these types of policies. I'm going to read a paragraph and then we'll get your brief response, then we'll take a break and come back. In 2022, the Wauwatosa School Board approved a new sex education curriculum. Among other things, it expects 6th graders to define different types of sexual intercourse. Kindergartners learn about genitalia with the help of cartoon drawings, and 3rd graders are informed that no matter their body parts, they may feel like another gender. Notably, the newly adopted units are based on what Linda just said, the National Sex Education Standards, right? Which encourage teaching 3rd graders about puberty blockers, 6th graders about abortion, and students as young as kindergarten about gender identity. Before we take a brief pause, Linda, just your thoughts.
This is ridiculous. This is such a betrayal of our children, yes. And then continues to be mental health issues, higher rates of pregnancy, teen pregnancy, and of course the abortions that go with that. And the increase in kids who identify as LGBTQ or something else has increased from just a few percentage points 20 years ago to around 25% of high schoolers right now. That's all promotion. Nobody's born that way. We need to pull this back, and those kids are all at much higher risk of sexuality issues all across the board, STDs, of mental health issues. They're at much higher risk of suicidality. We need to stop this.
Yes, and that's why we bring on people like you, and we try to raise awareness and get people to share the podcast, because there are, and I'm sorry, even in our churches, Linda, there are far too many naive parents, maybe overly optimistic, thinking this isn't an issue where their kids attend. But we've got to take a brief pause. We'll be right back with Linda Harvey on Worldview Matters.
Today's show is brought to you by Harbinger's Daily, world news biblically understood. Stay informed at harbingersdaily.com.
Hey friends, education is so important, especially from a Judeo-Christian perspective. Right now, Freedom Project Academy is enrolling students for this fall with live, anytime, and homeschool courses for pre-kindergarten through the 12th grade. And to celebrate 15 years of academic excellence, we're offering a 15% discount on all courses. Visit freedomforschool.com. That's freedom, school.com. Use the code DAVID15 to save 15%. That's David15. Save 15% on all courses at Freedom Project Academy. Linda Harvey, missionamerica.com. The next article, this blew my mind. It didn't really shock me, but I was disappointed that they will use any quote-unquote crisis, and they're redefining what a crisis is, they meaning the government and the schools, to get to kids. They recruit kids. They're expanding this definition of crisis, Linda, and the government programs are using families. They're trying to split families apart. They're imposing leftist, progressive agendas on way too many children, as you write. They're more suicide hotlines, but they don't really help in the way that we would think they should help young, confused, or suicidal kids. Please explain this. We'll dive into it.
Okay, so many of you, your listeners, will already have heard of the relatively new in the last couple of years National Suicide Hotline 988. Okay, it's out there for anyone, adults or adolescents, who have issues with suicidality. They're considering harming themselves. And in what I'm saying, I don't want to be insensitive to those families who have had that in their backgrounds, or who fear that, and all of that. However, look what they're doing with the suicide hotlines. This was under Joe Biden, and what they did was they subcontracted part of the 988 service out to the Trevor Project. If any of you have been studying the LGBTQ movement promoted to our kids, and there's a lot about Trevor on our website, this is a highly corrupt, pro-homosexual, pro-transgender child corruption group. They started out and they pose as a suicide hotline, but what they do is they say they're restricted to 13-year-olds and up, but there's no meaningful age verification. And what they do is they always affirm a same-sex attracted or gender confused child in those ideologies, in those behaviors, when the child dials 988. And here's what happens. 988, you can dial that, and apparently you get a phone tree that you can just stay on the line, or you can choose one of three specialized options: military, Spanish, or LGBTQ youth. So they're indoctrinating kids, and if they go to Trevor, if they're put in the line for the Trevor subcontract of the 988 service, they will be affirmed, and of course always affirmed in what they're thinking is along those lines. And then there is this Trevor service, quote unquote, called Trevor Space. It's chat rooms with names like Gay Men's Club. I'll just use my cheat sheet here. Witchcraft Club, Furries Club, Chosen Family Club, Moms Are Overrated, and so on. And there is no vetting of who's in these groups. So there can be adults in here. This is a sex predator's dream because you can. Our friend Brenda Lebsack, who's an activist in California, done a lot on this. She dug out the fact that you can, when she posed as a child, as an adolescent, that you can give out your phone number with no problem in these chat rooms to the people that you meet in these chat rooms. So the government, U.S. government, is subcontracting with Trevor. Many local schools use Trevor as a resource listed on their website for suicide prevention.
So a parent who's concerned about this can go to their school's website and see if it's on there, or is this the NEA?
Well, it's both. Trevor has been around for 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
So schools have been convinced that Trevor is a safe space, and especially for the always victimhood playing LGBTQ movement. And so this is how they've patted the LGBTQ activists on the head and said, sure, we'll list Trevor Project on our school website. But when they get there, this is what they get. And so the other thing, if we have time,
yes,
just remember the guy who stole the luggage 3 times, the Biden administration official who was in the nuclear waste program, Sam Benton. Okay, he was with the Trevor Project. He was their chief lobbyist in Washington before he went into all these other things. And he wrote an awful lot of the policy on affirming, quote unquote, children in gender ideology, even without your parents' permission. That's the kind of, and if you remember this guy, he was very much into sadomasochism, posing as, and all the kinds of leather and chains and things that they do in that lifestyle. So that's the kind of leadership you've got here, and they've fooled a lot of people. So the good news is that apparently the Trump administration is looking at taking Trevor out of the picture, or taking the LGBTQ youth option out of the 988 suicide hotline. So back to local. Then the local schools, like in Ohio, we are now promoting this through our Republican governor, and it's now mandated that the 988 number be listed on all high school and college student IDs.
Wow.
And this, while they're still doing this propaganda and indoctrination of these vulnerable kids that are same-sex attracted, or been persuaded that they're the opposite sex, who go to these websites. I mean, the whole thing is such a scam, and it's manipulating vulnerable kids and exploiting them. We need to get Trevor off the books completely. Luckily, they have lost some level of funding. I don't know how serious it is. I hope they lose a lot of funding. But we need to get them out of there, and we need to really look at the suicide prevention, other issues in our schools. There's a lot of other things I can talk about. I know we're limited on time, so you lead me as to what you want me to talk about.
Well, I'll just share a brief quote from your article. How'd we ever exist before there were armies of counselors and social workers and government funding and government getting involved in counseling and directing the kids down these roads? It says, in past times, troubled youth turned to parents, grandparents, friends, pastors, neighbors, and most of the time, they would not persuade, for example, a suicidal girl, that the solution to her problems is to reject her parents' wishes. None would urge her to seek therapeutic sessions and medication to, quote unquote, become the opposite gender. But Linda, you say that's exactly what they're doing now, and they're using this Trevor Project to do it, right?
And the National Suicide Hotline, which is under, I believe, the HHS department. Okay. So hopefully Robert Kennedy will take a hold of this and evaluate it for what it is. So
state by state, we've got 3 minutes left. What can people do? I know you're working at this in Ohio. I need to check with Wisconsin Family Council and Wisconsin Family Action Wisconsin to see if I haven't read anything about this yet. Go ahead.
What I would say is go to your Department of Education website, your state Department of Education website, look in there, just the search term suicide prevention. See what programs they have. We have in Ohio, we have a required hour a year, grades 6 through 12, and they have curricula there listed that they recommend. And this is, again, we're a highly Republican, but sort of a rhino Republican state. But some of those curricula list some things that are in other ways questionable. Peer-to-peer counseling, like through groups called the Hope Squad, Sources of Strength. Those are some of the curricula out there. Do you want a 13-year-old counseled by a 17-year-old? Not if they're very vulnerable, like some of these kids are. This is a minefield of guidance that will misdirect people, and on both sides, it's not good for the counselee to have that kind of influence on their peers. So that's the kind of stuff they're doing to try to help the mental health crisis that we are in. Very much so. Yeah.
And there are many, many, many more young people because of COVID and even because of all the LGBTQ push through the decades. There are many more confused and potentially suicidal kids. But you say what they're doing is child abuse and family disruption, and also these policies where even children's hospitals are allowing teens to consent to their own care without parental consent. This is another problem. We don't have time to get into it. We've talked about this a little bit in the past. The parental notification or parental consent issue. Linda, there's so many things a young family, mom and dad, have to be aware of, right?
Yes, there's so much. And I just urge you to look into this with your local school system, go on their website and poke around for anti-bullying, safety issues, suicide prevention, and then do the same thing at your state departments of education. And you'll find some things that you may raise some eyebrows over.
Okay, thanks, Linda. Your friends can go to missionamerica.com, a lot of resources on her website. And this article we were talking about, government exploits a crisis to, quote unquote, rescue children. And we know they're not rescuing children. What they're doing is recruiting. A friend of mine, a pastor friend, often says they cannot reproduce, so they have to recruit. And they do that successfully. The devil is making disciples and the left is recruiting, and we've got to be aware and fight these battles and continue to speak on these. Linda, appreciate all of your work, and thanks for coming on again.
Thank you so much for what you do, David. God bless you.
You're most welcome. Good to see you. And again, friends, happy Natural Family Month. God bless you. Thanks for sharing the podcast. And as always, keep speaking the truth about things that matter.